For our very first episode, we're bringing you the story about Suzanne Morphew. We all know the details, but do we know what the questions are that still need to be asked? Well, hopefully we're going to get some of those answers in this episode. I'm Chris McDonough, a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Welcome to the interview room. I'm so grateful that you're here. You know, this channel, we're going to cover fascinating people, amazing destinations, true crime, mysteries, a whole variety of stories I think you're going to find fascinating.
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you, we miss you, your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you. I want you back so bad.
Right now in a Fox 21 special report, the latest on the Chaffee County woman who vanished on Mother's Day.
Suzanne and her family lived in the picturesque small town of Salida, Colorado, in the heart of the Rocky Mountains. The Morphews moved there from Indiana in 2018. Everything appeared normal on the surface with the family, then suddenly, Suzanne vanished. It's reported that sometime before her disappearance, the 49-year-old wife and mother was communicating with a friend over social media. Then abruptly, that communication ended. Suzanne's husband, Barry, reported to police that on Mother's Day, May 10, 2020, he had left for a job several hours away and left without awakening his wife. When Suzanne's daughters, who were out of town, couldn't reach their mom, they contacted Barry. He asked a neighbor to check the family's home. When the neighbor reported that Suzanne's car was still there, Barry asked the neighbor to see if Suzanne's bike was there, saying she may have gone for a ride. The bike was missing, and authorities were called. During the initial police investigation, the bike and other unknown items were found. Authorities continued to search the mountainous and rugged terrain around the Morphew home days after her disappearance. Multiple search warrants were executed at the home, and reportedly evidence was recovered, but there was no sign of Suzanne. Officials continue to circulate flyers in the area and have received well over 1,000 tips to date. 4 months after Suzanne's disappearance, her brother Andy Mormon organized a large-scale search of the Maysville-Salida area that involved 700 volunteers, cadaver dogs, and searchers on horseback. Her husband Barry did not participate in the search, and it's still an ongoing investigation.
You know, one of the first things that you learn as an investigator is a whole bunch of dynamics about behavior. But one of the biggest things that you learn is about trust. I've reached out to the Cold Case Foundation, to people that I trust, and Greg Cooper and Dean and the team over there, and just asked them to give us a little understanding of, you know, how people think. Guys, what do you think?
Thanks, Chris. You know, when we talk in general about trust, one of the things that I think we can think about is the object lesson of an onion. An onion, if you think about it, has multiple layers, very thin layers, but when they're all brought together, they create one hard, solid mass. When you take that onion away, it's gone. Same way trust is gone. So when you think about building back trust, you have to think of it in terms of those layers of an onion. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of multiple layers to ever get back to a level of trust. So that's kind of in a general thought what we look at when we're thinking about trust. But Greg, when we think about trust, particularly when we're looking at victims and some of the trust issues that may be there behaviorally, can you kind of speak to that for a moment?
Hey, Chris, good to be with you. Just thought we might cover a couple of points about victimology and trust. When we look at victimology, which is the first, what we refer to as the first filter of profiling, we're trying to gauge a victim's level of risk to becoming a victim of that particular type of crime. And by doing so, depending on whether they're low, medium, or high risk, we get a sense as to the potential relationship between the victim and the offender. And the lower risk the victim, the higher the probability that that victim has high trust relationships, because they associate mostly with people that they know, their family, loved ones, neighbors that they're familiar with, their friends, and they've established, generally speaking, long-term relationships.
So then what would you say, Greg, about the trust level issues of a offender?
Offenders are constantly in a state of awareness, sensitivities to trust that they're attempting to develop with potential victims, even if it's a short period of time. Now that's their manipulation of trying to establish credibility with a potential victim, either on the long-term, long-haul basis, or on a very short-term basis. But in terms of their trust in others, typically they have very low trust, because they mostly recognize these relationships as temporary. They look at these relationships as what they can get out of these folks, and manipulating them to the point of using them for their own purposes. And that's anything from nuisance types of crimes all the way up to and including, of course, the more serious crimes of sexual assault or even homicide. So typically these folks, they don't have high trust. It's very low trust, because they themselves are in a state of manipulation with potential victims and people around them. I think it's very often a projection of their own character into people around them, yet recognizing that they identify weaknesses in potential victims that they will capitalize on and exploit for their own purposes.
If I look at it from that perspective, think about for a moment if I've got maybe a case that's gone from almost what we would classify as kind of a domestic violence scenario that escalates. Would you see any patterns there developing over time in that relationship? If, let's say, your offender and your victim, either are in some type of a relationship, would you see the victim's trust going away even in other relationships as well, if that's constantly kind of going up and down cyclically?
Yeah, within a domestic violence situation, for example, depending on the pattern of that, the dismantling of that relationship, and the length of time that it's taken for the relationship to escalate to the point where an assault occurs, for example. Typically, when you have an abuse cycle, as an example, within a domestic setting, the victim, over a period of time, while initially there may have been a high trust level between the victim and the offender, over a period of time and a series of escalating events up to and including assaults, whether it be for the first time or a series of assaults that escalate and become more and more violent. That relationship and that level of trust, obviously, as a result of those experiences, it implodes, they become dismantled. And so the victim will attempt to adapt, recognizing within those cycles of abuse the different phases that lead up to an ultimate assault. It's something they become very familiar with. They recognize in the behavior, the verbal and nonverbal behavior of the offender, this cycle of escalation and the stress level that builds within that cycle, anticipating eventually that it's going to happen, and they'll try to do whatever they can to mitigate it, or in fact, in some cases, not just mitigate it, but escalate it to get it over with, because the next phase after an assault is what is often referred to as a honeymoon phase. And typically they go back into that relationship where the offender attempts to rebuild a level of confidence and trust through remorse. Now all of a sudden he's very attentive. He's bringing flowers or gifts. And so it just depends on the length of time within a domestic violence situation on how long these things have occurred and what the history is. And typically victims know exactly what's going on with a domestic partner who is engaged in violent activity. They're very sensitive to these cycles and very much aware. And so when they know that cycle begins, in many cases, they want to get through that phase as quickly as possible, get it over with, and bump into the more positive aspects of that cycle.
Well, this has been great. Thanks for your thoughts. And Chris, we'll throw it back to you, and look forward to the next time we get the chance.
Thank you guys from the Cold Case Foundation. I'm really grateful for that insight. Now that we have a little better understanding about trust and why people trust in certain ways, let's talk about Suzanne's trust. You know, when we look at her Facebook page, when we look into her life, we see that she had a lot of interest. Some of those interests are actually listed on her page. But I have another question. What about her family members? Who did they trust? Her father trusted her husband, but who does her husband trust? Well, the only way to find out is to call him. So I did.
Barry.
Hey, Barry, Chris, how are you?
Hey, good.
I appreciate you taking my call. Hey, I saw you recently passing out flyers about your sweet wife, and from the interview room. Yeah.
Excuse me?
Yeah, from the interview room. That's all right. So how can I help? I saw you were out passing out flyers and stuff. I thought maybe I could just shoot you up a call here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't recognize you, and I've been burnt by too many people calling me that I don't know, so I'm sorry I can't talk to you.
Okay, so
If I knew who you were and knew you were genuine, I would be more than happy to.
oh yeah, no, I'm the guy from the
I've had
Yeah, go ahead.
25 people call me just like you did and just burn me up.
Yeah, not a problem.
I can't trust anybody. Where are you from?
Originally, I'm from North Carolina.
And you live in Salida now?
No, I saw you were passing out flyers in Salida. I'm the guy from the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I don't trust any of the YouTube guys. They just clobber me. So I'm sorry.
Well, no, I get where you're coming from. I'm not trying to put you in a bad spot. I'm really just trying to help Suzanne.
Yeah, I wish I could trust you, but I'm sorry, I just can't.
What would it take for you to trust me? After the phone call ended, I had to ask myself, why would someone not want the help in finding their wife who had vanished? And why the mistrust for just so many people? Who's then to be trusted to find Suzanne? Perhaps the authorities, her family, her girlfriends, neighbors, his family. How about the community and churches? Maybe it's the world. I'm not sure yet. After all, it was reported recently he was downtown Salida passing out flyers about Suzanne with local authorities. Is that what the search has become? Flyers? Or maybe conversations around the dinner table? I don't know. Like you, I find it odd that he chose not to participate in searching for his wife, along with her brother and about 700 volunteers. Did he not trust all of those people? Another question that comes to mind, is this the level of trust that Suzanne expected? You know, this conversation has left more unanswered questions than, quite frankly, that it has answered. And I bet you probably feel the same way. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. Leave your comments down below. As you could hear on that call, trust is built, and sometimes it takes quite some time to build that trust up. Okay? It doesn't mean somebody's responsible. It doesn't mean somebody's not responsible. In fact, it's our responsibility to put somebody in the circle, or quite frankly, get them out of the circle. Okay? That's what I'm hoping to deliver here in this channel. And as we dig a little bit deeper into Suzanne's case, I'm hoping that you can help me in there with that as well. Okay? So hit that subscribe button down below, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.